Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of On the Mark. Straight talk across the narrows. This is your host, Mark Brantley, and we're here every Wednesday to have a conversation with you, the members of the listening public. This evening we have a few guests, and so we would want to get into it quite early. I think we had a little bit of a hiccup. We're trying to get that sorted. Okay, I'm back with you. This is Mark Brantley. Welcome to On the Mark. Good evening to all of our friends and family here in Nevis, of course, St. Kitts, to all the people. Good evening to the people, friends and family, and of course, Nevisians and Kittitians in the diaspora, those in North America, particularly the United States, Canada, those who are in the United Kingdom and elsewhere. Welcome to another edition. As I said, this evening we have quite a packed show. We have lots of guests, so I won't give my usual introduction, although there's a lot to discuss. This is the people's show in every sense, and from time to time people do come and want to be a part of it and want to bring some information to you. So we have an early guest in Mr. Dolvin Nisbet. I know him as Miser. My friend, I used to call him the jamming coordinator, but he's here this evening and he has some information that he would want to impart to you, and I want to welcome him to the show. Welcome, Mr. Nisbet, and I will turn things over to you so you can tell the public what it is you have to share with them.
Wonderful. Mark, thanks a lot for having me on your show. I want to say greetings to everyone out there in Radio Land, and to those in the U.S., happy Thanksgiving in advance. And I don't think it's too early yet to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone. I'm here basically on behalf of my church, the St. Paul's Anglican Church, of which I'm the treasurer, to highlight two upcoming fundraising events. The first one is a barbecue at the church grounds on this Saturday, starting at noon. And then we also be having our 5th annual boat ride to Montserrat on the Sea Hustler on Boxing Day. Now, we have these fundraisers not because we like money, but because we need help. We recently renovated the old Charlestown Girls School in 2011 for more than $500,000. And the good thing about it, we had financing from a local bank, Bank of Nevis, with a local architect, the Honorable Spencer Brand, and a local contractor, the Mighty Flamingo. He did an excellent job restoring the facility with using most of the original stones. We added a kitchen and bathrooms with showers, and now the facility is looking very pristine and is used for seminars and the disaster shelter. Last use was during the hurricanes of Irma and Maria. A brief history of the old girls' school. It was constructed in 1900 and run by the church in an era when the church took responsibility for the education of the people. In 1915, the government took over the responsibility of education, and the building was used to educate girls until 1984, when the schools in Charlestown became integrated. In 92, the building ceased to be an educational institution. And of course, we do recall two of the more well-known head teachers from that era, we had Lindis Walters and Maud Cross. And of course, during that time when the government used the facility, it was free of cost. Now, just to highlight the first of the fundraising activity, the barbecue this Saturday. Tickets are available at $20. It starts at noon, and it's under the supervision of Eddie Emmanuel Keynes Richards. You know, this gentleman from up to the water department every Friday night where he does his barbecue. On sale, we'll have chicken, fish. Zumbaya assures me he'll have a little barracuda and shark on the side. We'll also be having ribs, pork chops, pigtails, hot dogs, and black pudding. We'll have a full bar and music by DJ Tony. It starts at noon this Saturday. And then our 5th annual boat ride to Montserrat. It's on Boxing Day on the MVC Hustler. Leaves Nevis at 4, leaves Montserrat at 6, and we'll be having the Odyssey Band with us. Of course, it's Juve in Montserrat on Boxing Day, and they have a Christmas carnival, Christmas festival. And if you're not into Juve, of course, it's sightseeing. You can look at the volcano ravaged Plymouth, and you can also visit Arrow, the Calypso Arrow, the legendary fame. You can visit his grave. I'm asking for everybody's support for our 2 fundraising ventures, and especially past students of the old girls' school. Please come on out. If you have some funny stories, we'd be happy to listen. And again, thanks to everybody for your support, and thank you, Mark, for having me on.
Okay, before you go though, I don't know if you've told us the cost of the boat ride.
The boat ride is $250, only $250. And the ticket sales end on December 23rd.
Okay, so you're going on Boxing Day to Montserrat. You are charging $250 round trip.
Round trip, indeed.
Okay, and so for that, people get what? Just the boat ride, or they get food? What do they get?
Just the boat ride. But of course, you can have a good time in Montserrat.
Okay, so people go down to Montserrat, and you say 4 and 6. You had me a little confused. You leave at what, 4 a.m.?
Leave Nevis at 4 a.m.
Okay.
and leave Montserrat at 6 p.m.
And how long does it take to get to Montserrat, do you know?
It's a little over 2.5 hours on the Sea Hustler.
Okay, so it's a good sale to go to Montserrat. I confess that I myself have not been to Montserrat since I was a boy. I think the last time I was in Montserrat, I was about 17 years old.
Well, I can tell you that the Honorable Alexis Jeffers has never missed one of our trips.
Well, he's a good Anglican, staunch Anglican, and so. But Boxing Day is always a tough time because, you know, family and the like. It'd be good if you can take your whole family on the trip. Then it'll be a nice family trip. But certainly, I wish you well with that. Now, I'm a little interested in the barbecue, because you're having a barbecue this Saturday. And you mentioned Eddie.
Yes.
Yes, Eddie is
known also to some as the monk.
He's masquerading as a chef.
I think he has a pretty good product, actually.
He has a pretty good product.
Yes.
Okay, well, you know, I don't know. I see him there cutting up the food sometimes. I'm not so sure that he's the one cooking it. But in any event, he's my good friend, and he would know that I'm only teasing him. But certainly, the barbecue sounds interesting. Could you run through again and tell the public the menu that you have, that people can come out on Saturday?
Absolutely. We'll be having barbecued chicken, barbecued fish, barbecued ribs, barbecued pork chops, pigtails, hot dogs, and black pudding.
So the black pudding going to be barbecued too?
No.
Well, I was wondering, because you're going through a listing. So you have somebody on the line for this purpose? Okay, put them on, please. Let's see who this is. Good evening, you're on the mark.
Yes, good evening, Honorable. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Let me say good evening to Dalvin Nisbet.
Yes.
Good evening.
I just like to add one or two things to what Miser was saying about the boat ride. Is that I want people to understand the situation. Is that we had made contact with another boat, the Surf, and the gentleman, the captain, said that he's going to do it, and then he said he's not going to do it, but he's putting on the show. You know, and I just want to let the public know that you know, the church, we're doing it just to fix the church roof and the church hall. You know, it's not a money-making thing for us. You know, and we want to thank the government for whatever they're going to give to the church, you know, to help us repair the roof and so on. You know, so we're asking you to come out and do what you got to do, you know, to help the church raise funds. Because every year, you know, as far as I know, that the St. Paul's Anglican Church normally put on this boat trip, you know, not to compete with anybody, but it seems to me like this time we're having competition, you know. But I just want to say to the public is that please come on out and support the church. You know, that's why we all need to work together hand in hand to support the church, so the church can get the church roof on and we can go and praise God as much as possible. But in terms of the barbecue as well, I want everybody to come out and support the barbecue. This is just another fundraising activity so that we can get to help. And we're just asking for your support. I'll be on the grill until whenever we finish.
Okay.
That's my 2 pence.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Nisbet, the barbecue starts when?
At noon on Saturday.
And runs until when?
Until 7, 8 o'clock in the evening.
Okay.
We'll be there, hanging out.
And you have a DJ Tony, you say?
DJ Tony, the music man.
I never hear anything about no Tony. Tony.
His real name is Wilmer Broadbelt.
Well, I know exactly who you're talking about, but I want to tease him when I see him, you know. But all right, Mize, it sounds to me like you have things down and that things are in order. I would want to lend my own commendation to you and the efforts you're making. The Anglican Church, and certainly St. Paul's Anglican Church in particular, I think that they have really been a mainstay in the community here in our society for a very, very long time. I thought the little history you gave of the girls' school was interesting, going back, I think you said, to 1900 or thereabouts. So I feel that these are certainly, if you can date anything back to 1900, you know what kind of contribution they've made, not only over the decades, but certainly over a century. They've been involved with all that is happening here in the island of Nevis. So I certainly would want to lend my own commendation and to invite the public to come out and support. You have built up Eddie this evening and referred to him as a chef, and I believe that it was a real reason for him to call in, because I believe all the other things he had to say, he really wanted to say he was going to be on the grill to make a point. So I would hope that people go out and support and get some of that good barbecue that you're going to do. You say barbecue, pigtail, ribs, chicken, you have some fish, and you say Zumbai.
Zumbai will have a little barracuda and shark.
They have barracuda and shark. If you're going to be selling barracuda, I hope you have the paramedics
standing
by.
That barracuda is actually for the boys.
For the boys?
Yes, for the boys.
Well, I hope the paramedics are standing by for the boys. You know, you fellas like to take some chances. But all the best, and I trust and hope that the fundraising efforts go well. And then just remind us again when the boat ride is going to be.
Yes, the barbecue is this Saturday, starting at noon at the Church Hall grounds, and then the boat ride is on Boxing Day, just $250. Leaves Nevis at 4 a.m. and leaves Montserrat at 6 p.m.
Okay, 250 EC dollars or 100 US dollars will get you on the boat to go to Montserrat, leaving at 4 a.m. and coming back at 6 p.m. It is Juve in Montserrat, so 2.5 hours you get there at 6:30. I know the good church members are not interested in the Juve side, but certainly others who might be interested in getting on board and going to Montserrat. And I've heard that it's an excellent trip. You have indicated the Deputy Premier, Alexis Jeffers, never misses it. He's a good practicing Anglican. I was about to say Catholic. Good practicing Anglican. And so we hope that all the Anglicans will come out, all the supporters really of a fine institution will come out, and all of those who would have passed through the girls' school, who have benefited from that and would have those memories, you're inviting one and all to come out and support a very worthy cause.
Indeed.
Okay.
Thank
you very much for that, Mr. Nisbet, and I wish you all the very best. All right? Take good care. Okay. There you had it, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Dalvin Nisbet, better known as Miser, and he is the person who is leading the charge for the Anglican Church in terms of ensuring that they raise the necessary funds to deal with their roof and funds to deal with the girls' school and to do all that they need to do. That is going to be very, very important for them. All right, so we're trying to change guard. If you hear a lot of rustling and rumbling, I apologize for that. We don't have the benefit of commercial break, so we're simply trying now to get some new folks in, and the technicians are trying to set things up as best as they can so that we can move to the next level and bring some important information to you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think the changeover is complete. Mr. Nisbet has departed, and we now have with us some new guests, and I will ask them to introduce themselves. As you know, we have a monumental occurrence in our country. Something that I have said is as momentous, that's the word I'm looking for, something as momentous, something as transformative as when we got the right to vote. I know some people may say that I'm overstating it, but that is how seriously I view it, and that is the National Health Insurance. We all understand that sickness is something that awaits us all. We are, by our nature, flawed, and someone reminded me that from the moment we are born, we start to die. Sounds bad, but so it goes. And the reality is that all of us usually have a date with sickness. Some of us hold it off for a very long time, but invariably we get sick. Some of us may not get sick, but we have something visited upon us. We may have an accident. We may be the victim of violence. All kinds of things may happen. And that is why they have something called insurance. Insurance is intended to give you some level of protection when bad things happen to you. And the situation that we have in our country is that we have a very high burden of NCDs, non-communicable diseases. And that's just a fancy term to describe diabetes, as we say locally, sugar, to describe hypertension, to describe things like some cancers and the like, and those lead to very high morbidity in St. Kitts and Nevis. In fact, I saw a frightening statistic recently which suggests that 8 out of every 10 deaths are as a result of NCDs. And that was a regional statistic that I saw, and I believe it has become so important that the United Nations, just at the last General Assembly, had a special session that our Prime Minister, Dr. Harris, was involved in on the question of NCDs. It is really seen as an almost a pandemic in the region in terms of its impact on our people. And we have all the triggers in terms of obesity, we have problems in terms of our diet, and we continue to preach from the Ministry of Health that we ought to lead healthier lifestyles, that moderate exercise, the right diet, and trying to stay away from bad practices such as smoking or excessive drinking of alcohol and the like, that we can, through lifestyle, make a difference. Well, we can, of course, do all that we can, but we appreciate that sickness, nevertheless, is something that awaits all of us. And as a consequence of that, it behooves us all to put ourselves in a position that when it comes, not if it comes, but when it comes, that we have the necessary resources. We have all, ladies and gentlemen, seen the impact of sickness. Sickness has bankrupted many of our nationals. We have people who are poor and who, when they become sick, have no succor, no assistance. We in the Nevis Island Administration have budgeted somewhere in the region of $600,000 each year to try and provide some relief to people who would otherwise not be able to afford medical care. I am certain that all of us have seen people going around with these little donation cards, asking one and all to give them a $10 or $100 to help them to go overseas to get medical assistance. I am sure that we all are aware of somebody who, for want of the necessary resources, might well have died or suffered unnecessarily because they do not have the resources necessary to either to go overseas or to access the quality of care that they need. We also have a situation in our country where many argue that the equipment and the necessary infrastructure to offer the quality of care that our doctors and nurses are capable of offering, that is often missing. And that is often missing because, of course, of the cost. So when we talk about MRI, we talk about CT scan, we talk about all of these diagnostic tools, and many people right here in the island of Nevis suffer because they have sometimes to travel as far as Antigua, St. Martin, to get an MRI. MRI, CT scan, all of these diagnostic tools make it easier for doctors and professionals, healthcare professionals, to properly diagnose and then, of course, treat. Now we have MRI on St. Kitts, but nevertheless, it requires, particularly in times of emergency, for people to scramble to get boats, sometimes in the dead of night, because sickness comes when it comes. We can't always tell it to come during sunlight hours or to come during regular working hours. So sometimes at 3 o'clock in the morning, that's when sickness comes and we have to scramble. So we have a number of difficulties. The inevitability of sickness for many, the cost associated with it to individuals and their families. I had a chat with a young man in St. Kitts just recently, and he said to me that he thought that he was doing quite well. Financially, he felt that from the jobs that he had been able to save a little money. Then he said his mom got sick, and he said he had to use every penny of his savings plus take a loan in order to take care of his mom. And that is a situation I believe that all of us can understand, because most of us have been in similar situations where we've had to find the resources, borrow sometimes, and in the case of many, beg. And the government, as I said in Nevis, has tried its best, but even the government doesn't have the capacity to provide the health care and the quality and quantity of health care that everybody requires. So, we have come up with a solution, this government, the unity government, and I want to make special mention of the Honorable Eugene Hamilton. And people may ask, why are you mentioning Eugene Hamilton? And I'm mentioning him because he sometimes is reluctant to mention himself. And I'm mentioning Eugene Hamilton because he has, from day one, we got in government in 2015, and from day one, he has championed this notion of national health insurance. The notion isn't new. In fact, one of our guests here, a good doctor, has been talking about national health insurance for a long time. But there has not been the level of political will to make it happen. And that is why I have to credit Eugene Hamilton, because he has led from the front on this particular issue. And if, let me not say if, but when we get to a national health insurance program for our entire country, where our people no longer have to go down in Basti and Charleston with a card to be begging people to help them because their child is sick or their mother is sick or they themselves are sick. When we can get to a stage where we can afford the equipment and the necessary treatment can be provided to our people. Many of our people, for example, have renal failure. They need dialysis. Without dialysis, they will die. As bluntly as that. And they need dialysis 2 and 3 times sometimes per week at a cost sometimes of $800 per treatment. Well, you do the math. 3 treatments per week by 800, that's $2,400 per week. Multiply that to get how much it costs per month. Multiply that to get how much it costs per year. And tell me, which of us could afford to maintain that kind of treatment in order to preserve our lives? And so the burden is very high, and for many people, it is catastrophic for them, financially and otherwise. So in addition to the burden that you bear of being ill, the psychological and emotional trauma that that causes to people and their families, in addition to that, you have the financial trauma that it causes. And sickness can cause economic ruin and force many families into poverty. And so with all of those consequences that sickness can bring, we have decided that national health insurance coverage is necessary. It is not new because we have seen it at work elsewhere. We have seen it at work in many what they call first world countries. But even here in the Caribbean and closer afield, we have seen it at work in the BVI quite recently. We have seen it at work in Turks and Caicos. And St. Kitts and Nevis, we see some model of it at work in Antigua, where they have the National Medical Scheme, I think it's called. National Benefits? Medical Benefits Scheme. So the truth of the matter is that there have been efforts made, or some variation of the same concept, to provide a safety net for our people. Now, I have here with me 3 experts, because all that you've heard is a politician talking. And these 3 individuals have been involved in the process. They understand the process, and they have embarked, both in St. Kitts and Nevis, on a series of consultations with you, the members of the public. We had a very good consultation in Bath Village just last evening, and I was privileged to have attended for some portion of that consultation. And I believe that tomorrow evening there's a second consultation at the St. Paul's Anglican Church, and then we have them successively at other points. I think on Monday the 26th they move to the Franklin Brown Community Center, Tuesday the 27th at Handlers Road Community Center, and then we take a bit of a break on the following week, Tuesday the 4th of December at the Jessop's Community Center. And I'm also being told that transportation is being provided. That's how important this process is. And I want the public to turn out. I was very disappointed to hear today in St. Kitts that they had some meetings and only 3 or 4 people showed up. And I want to encourage the people to show up. This is being done for you. Because as healthy and as strong as we all feel today, if sickness were to come, God forbid, at 3 o'clock tomorrow morning, we will be very happy that we have a national health insurance system in place to give us some relief and give us some protection. So I'm going to turn it over to the experts. I want to again commend Eugene Hamilton for his leadership on this matter, and I want to commend those who are here with me in the studio. They will introduce themselves for their role. I believe that this is truly a monumental and momentous development for our country, and when we can get there and we would have delivered this, I feel it is as groundbreaking as when we got the right to vote. I know some people will say that boy Brantley likes hyperbole, but this for me is not exaggeration. It is that important to us that we have a system that is rational, that is sensible, that makes healthcare more affordable and more within the reach of more of our people. And so with those words, I want to hand the show on the mark over to the new hosts, 3 people here, 2 beautiful ladies and 1 thorn sandwich between them, a young doctor who's here. And so I want them to introduce themselves and tell you all about the National Health Insurance Program. And then we hope to open the phones, because this is, in a way, a public consultation we're having on radio. So for those of you who are home in your beds and you may not have transportation, or you say, well, I may not reach to one of the community centers where these consultations are having, this is your opportunity this evening on the mark. Whether you're in the United States or in the United Kingdom or in Canada, where you have variations of health coverage in terms of health insurance, please feel free to call in and share your views and opinions when we open the lines. So tonight's a good night, because we don't have any politics, we don't have any rah-rah, we don't have any ro-ro. We just have a good conversation about the future of healthcare and health insurance, which we are seeking as a government to lead the way and to put in place a system that will bring relief to the vast majority of our people. And so let me turn it over now, and you can introduce yourselves and tell the public why you're here and what it is you have to tell them.
Okay, good night, everyone. I am Nicole Slack-Liburd, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Health and Gender Affairs. I'm also privileged to be part of the National Commission on Universal Health Care. We have a multi-sectoral team that was established formally in February 2018 that has been working in collaboration with the UE Health Economics Unit in Trinidad. A group is actually based here in St. Kitts, and we are working collaboratively over the last several months to put together something that we are presenting to the population in the Green Paper on Universal Health Care. I want to congratulate the Premier. He seems to be well versed on the topic. He gave a very good introduction as to why we need universal health care, referring to increased access to health care for the population and also sustainability of the health system. And so that is the rationale for universal health care. The Premier also spoke about treatment, but we also want to put on the table, of course, that health promotion and primary health care is an important part of universal health care. It's not just about treatment, but also preventing our population from becoming ill. So we have a document, a 22-page document that discusses various aspects of the program that we have put forward for consultation with the public. And this consultation, as you would have heard, would be at 5 locations in Nevis in the form of town hall meetings, 9 in St. Kitts, but we're also having several small group discussions with various groups, which commenced last week. And we also encourage you to contact us if you would like a presentation delivered to your workplace, church, community group, etc., because we recognize that not everyone, as was said, can access the town hall meetings, and we also like to engage special groups for their particular concerns on universal health care. We had a very interesting discussion recently with the diabetic group, looking at their concerns, and we heard about non-communicable diseases and how they impact our population. So with those few brief remarks, at least in the beginning, I would hand over to the rest of the team, but also to state that we'll also be joined shortly by the chairperson of the National Commission, who is Ms. Zilla Clark, and she is also will be available to be part of the discussion and answer any questions that you may have. So Dr. Rollins is the other member from Nevis on the National Commission, and I'll turn over to Dr. Rollins.
Good evening, listeners. I'm Dr. Bal Rollins, part of the Commission, as you've heard. And the purpose of this program tonight is to give you a bit of information as it relates to the introduction of universal health insurance in St. Kitts and Nevis, something which is near and dear to me. And also not just to give you information, but to get your feedback. What would you like to see in covered by the universal health insurance in St. Kitts and Nevis? What things would you want us to cover? What do you think we should leave out? How much you think it would cost? How should we generate a renewable, sustainable source of financing for healthcare in St. Kitts and Nevis? We want your ideas, because those of us on the Commission, we do not have all of the answers, and we want an input from the public. That is the reason why we're here, so that we can give you an idea as to what we're thinking, what the proposals are, and to get your feedback so you can tell us what you really would like it to be. Because it is your program, it is your health insurance, it is your health, and we want you to participate fully in it.
Good evening, everyone. My name is London Isbeth Brown. I'm here in my capacity as the Senior Legal Counsel at the Legal Department in Nevis. I am not a member of the Commission. I am, however, heartened to be here as part of the discussion, and I certainly would want to thank Ms. Sheila James for inviting me to be a part of this important discussion. I do agree with the Premier when he said this was the Universal Healthcare Plan is as important and earth-shattering as the right to vote, because I read the plan, and in my mind it seemed to be some type of watershed event that's taking place here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. We know that healthcare is critical. It is often said that a nation's wealth is good health, or some similar words. And in just for me, reading the plan and digging around, doing a little bit of research for tonight's presentation, the information already has certainly benefited me personally. I am sure that it will also benefit the members of the public. Like I said, health is something that's critical. The Premier painted a very interesting picture of how important good health, not just health, but good health is to each and every one of us. I see that the healthcare plan is a blueprint. As Dr. Rollins just said, it's basically for you. And we certainly would want you to be a part of the discussions, to visit the town hall, the meetings taking place. There's several of them, so if you miss one, you can catch the other, basically. And so I would certainly look forward to the discussion and putting in my little bit of contribution on such an exciting time within the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. There you have the experts who are speaking to you. We have had the publication of a green paper, which is, of course, the initial document based on the consultations and the feedback from the public. I'm told that the green paper should then transform itself into a white paper, and then at some point it becomes black letter law, I suppose. So we have some very important person now, I'm told, on the phone, calling in from St. Kitts. It's a Miss Azilla Clark. Is Miss or Mrs.? Yes. Miss Azilla Clark, and she has been integrally involved in the entire program to bring health insurance to us. I think she has chaired, am I correct? Chaired the commission, and she's on the phone, and she's been trying to get in all night. Ms. Clark, our apologies, but you're on now. Welcome to On the Mark.
A pleasant good evening, Mr. Premier, and to all of your guests and listeners this evening. It is my pleasure to join you remotely. The powers of technology keeps us as connected as we need to be.
Yes, I'm not sure how this is going to work, whether you're going to stay on the line throughout the show or you're simply going to make some kind of presentation and then leave us. That's entirely up to you.
I remain as long as I can, because I'll be very interested to hear also the comments received from the general public. If there's any technical difficulties, let me know, and I could always call back in.
Okay, so just let me check now. If Ms. Clark is on the line, we have still two lines available. Okay, Ms. Clark, I'm told that you will not in any way, shape, or form interrupt us, and we will give you the opportunity, as you say, remotely to be part of the panel. I confess that I don't know enough about what these documents contain. I've read, yes, but I would not presume to be an expert, and so I would certainly leave much of the discussion to the members here. But, and you know what, we'll open the phones now. If anybody wants to call, we are discussing the national universal health care for the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, and the numbers to call are 869-469-1616, 869-469-1700. Whilst we wait for persons to ring in, can we, ladies and gentlemen, have an indication to the public as to what the green paper contains? I mean, what are some of the highlights, you would say, of this proposed, and just want to get the language correct, is universal health care. Is that the language, or national health insurance? Universal health care.
Universal health insurance.
Okay, universal health insurance. You see, we're going from national, we're covering the whole universe in effect. So universal health insurance. So can we get just some highlights so that we can focus the mind of the public on some of the issues that they may find interesting? For example, we know that this is going to cost money. So how is it going to be financed? Can members of the public just now feel that, okay, all healthcare is going to be free? That, you know, those who need their eyes fixed and their ears fixed and they maybe want, you know, to straighten their nose, get dental work, you know, have augmentation, or how do you call it, the converse? De-augmentation? Reduction, that's the word. So you can augment and reduce cosmetic surgery. Would all of these things be covered, or are we just dealing with the hardcore, difficult diseases that we deal with, like the non-communicable diseases? So I think that those are going to be questions. What's going to be covered? How are we going to finance it? What are the proposals in that regard? And does the public have any views on that? And one of the ticklish issues that I'm always interested in, because if you consume news as voraciously as I do from the United States, they're always talking about pre-existing conditions. So if it is that I'm already sick, I'm already on dialysis, can I be covered under this scheme? And you have questions out there being asked of people. Say, listen, I'm not working. I am perhaps indigent. I'm perhaps somehow maybe I have some kind of disability, so I can't work. How are these people going to be captured? Those are all some of the questions I think that the public would want to know what is being proposed. And as you rightly pointed out, the green paper is a proposal. The idea is to consult, and those consultations to inform the process so that we then get to a white paper. Because one thing I've learned in my short life, well, boy, you're not so short now. One thing I've learned in my life so far, that no matter how much expertise you put together on any commission, they have members out there in the public who have practical, common sense ideas that can usually inform and assist the process and what we're doing. So I raised a couple of issues. Perhaps we can have a conversation as we wait and see if the public wants to talk to us about this. But you can tell us a bit, how is this going to be financed? What is going to be covered so that people get an idea of what they can expect? If I have a pre-existing condition, is this something that I'm likely to be covered, or how is it going to work? Please, take it away.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned some what, how, and who questions are very important. Let's look at the what. First, I'd like to say that the package that will be developed and funded for universal health care is based on our burden of disease. So we have done, we continuously do data collection, of course, through our health information unit, but we've also done some additional assessment to see our disease profile to determine what will be the content of the package. So for example, you spoke extensively about non-communicable diseases, which are our greatest burden of disease, and 80% that you refer to regionally is actually our situation here in St. Kitts and Nevis. So the diabetes, where about 20% of our population is affected, hypertension, about 35% of our population, the cancers and so on, of course, those are concerns, and those will be covered in terms of treatment. And also, of course, as I mentioned earlier, our health promotion initiatives also have to be heightened in this regard. We're also looking at issues, for example, such as mental health, which are also a concern for our population. So the package will be based on what the disease profile is, what is reflective in our population. So that's just a snippet of what. So when you think of some of the treatment that you might need for just in terms of your screening and your assessment and also your treatment of these diseases, for example, your laboratory test, if for example, you're diabetic and had to have an amputation, those services would be covered, your rehabilitative care. If you have been diagnosed with a mental illness and have to access care that includes occupational therapy and counseling, for example, those are services that will also be covered. The Green Paper also talks about exclusions or proposed exclusions. I want to again state that this is not set in stone. The public, of course, has a chance to comment on what should be or should not be included, and those will be taken into consideration.
Okay, stick a pin. I hear the phones ringing. And after all, we want to hear what you have to say, but we also want to hear what the members of the public have to say. So let's go to the phones. Good evening, you're on the mark.
Greetings to my beloved sisters and brothers, and especially good evening to you, my beloved brother.
Good evening to you.
No, I would like to offer, a couple of suggestions that in this pursuit of the universal health care, that and a drive starting from in the schools, elementary schools, public service announcement, promote healthy living on a daily basis. Schools, churches, wherever, billboards, wheresoever. And in the scheme of things, in this universal health care, I may hear nobody talk about it. I don't know if I'm wrong, correct me. I ain't hear no holistic, nothing to calculate holistic health. Am I wrong or right?
When you say when you say holistic health, how are you using that language? What do you mean?
Well, holistic health is just like natural, instead of the conventional way, where we use all these conventional synthetic medicine and things. I'm talking about our traditional way of promote that, because you got a lot of holistic doctors throughout the Caribbean, and we might be in St. Kitts and Nevis, beloved brother, especially coming from the Rastafari movement. And I don't want to hear this backward thinking, Brother Mark, and the brother dear and the sisters dear. Oh, that's long time, that primitive way thing. No, because even in this country, but the holistic medicine is high, and the agenda that being promoted in all spheres of life in this country, beloved. But I'm not saying things, but I think that's our traditional way.
Okay,
what is it?
I'm just trying to get to the point that you're making. The point that you're making is that holistic medicine should be included covered under the national health insurance?
Yes, of course, of course.
Okay. So
promoted too, not this just conventional medicine,
All right.
alone.
So I'm just trying to get it, because as I said, this is in a way a public consultation that we're having. So your sense is that if people opt for holistic medicine, some treatment that is a natural treatment, that should be covered as well.
Exactly, my beloved
Okay.
brother.
All right. Good.
Okay, man. I continue to listen, beloved.
Okay. Thank you very much
Okay,
for your
one love.
contribution. Okay. One love as well. All right. It is quarter to the hour of 9 o'clock. We have with us 3 professionals, healthcare professional, healthcare administration professional, and a lawyer, legal professional. We have a high-powered team, and on the line, we have the chairperson of the commission, which is bringing to us the National Health Insurance and the National Health Insurance consultations. As I say, an earth-shattering development for our country, and we want to, of course, have the views of the public on this. The numbers again are 869-469-1616, 869-469-1700. But for the members here in the studio and Ms. Clark, who's on the line, could you tell us a bit about the financing options that the green paper, proposes?
Okay. The green paper proposes several options for financing, which are not set in stone once again. So including salary deductions in the form of contributions. This is one proposal where an employee would contribute a certain amount and the employer would match that amount.
Do you have any suggested amount yet? A
not
percentage?
At this time.
No?
Not at this time. But I also want to say that, as I mentioned earlier, that this process is very scientific, and we do have a University of the West Indies team on board, and they are actually looking into costing all of our services, and so we will be better informed to recommend a percentage.
Do we have a sense in our neighboring islands, like the BVI, what they charge and how that is financed?
Yes. I can mention that as part of the research into the development of this process, we would have studied systems in the British Virgin Islands and Turks and Caicos Islands, and we have seen figures such as 3% employee and 3% employer, and also 3.75%, and also matched by the employer in the same amount. So those are some of the systems that we've experienced and studied. Also, in addition to the employer and employee contribution in terms of matching and deductions, there's also some other suggestions placed on the table coming out of the green paper, or a combination of suggestions, including, for example, the 1% employment injury benefit that is currently paid by employers if someone is injured on the job, for example, looking at redirecting that into an established fund for universal health care. Looking at also, for example, the $600,000, that's just specific to Nevis that you mentioned earlier, Premier, in terms of redirecting that into a pool, and that can also provide startup funding for financing of that. Also looking at some of the annual premium that the government pays right now to cover its employees, which is approximately at least $2 million in Nevis, looking at redirecting that into a pool, so at least we have startup funding. And there's also the housing and social levy, for example, that is what is attached to persons' salary deductions at this time, looking at redirecting some of that, and or a portion of that, and trying to determine how much will go to health, for example, because health is a social service. So these are all options on the table, and we have heard others from consultations, very interesting ones, such as, for example, the annual donation that Social Security makes to the Ministries of Health for both St. Kitts and Nevis, delaying that on an annual basis and saying, for example, we're going to have an injection of funding, so we want to request funds for a period of 3 or 4 years. So we have extended funds to actually invest and start up the system. Persons have also suggested a bond sort of arrangement. I'm going to ask Ms. Clark to speak on that. You know, I know that that's one of her issues that she discussed at one of the town hall meetings, so we can get her view as well onto that arrangement. Ms. Clark?
Yes, good evening. Yes, the bond idea was raised at one of our first consultations in St. Kitts. It is similar to how the Caribbean Court of Justice established itself, where a bond will be issued by, in our case, our government, that will be valued at an amount projected to not just start up the fund, but cover it for a certain number of years, and based on the issuance of the bond, the value of which will be invested in the NHI and then redeemable on the market. When that was raised with one of our radio personalities here, they did indicate that we would have to look at confidence, considering that we had to do some augmentations with our standby agreement with the IMF. But again, all options are on the table, and each is presented to our consultant team for them to crunch the numbers, look at the possibilities. What was interesting about that is because you can issue it for the value that you would need for perhaps the first 3 to 5 years, and therefore delay what would be either an increase or an introduction in the local sphere. But again, it's based on the creditor confidence for the nation.
Can I ask a question to the team that's here? The suggestion of a salary deduction, it seems to my mind to be fair in the sense that everybody who's working would contribute. But even where they have countries have income tax, they tend to exempt persons who are earning below a certain threshold. Is there any sense of how, assuming we go in that direction and there is a tax basically on persons' salaries to support the health insurance system, is there a sense of maybe those who earn below a certain threshold not contributing, or would it be the preference that everybody who is working contributes?
I think I read somewhere in the plan, though, that there will be some consideration for persons on making minimum wage, for example, which I think would be very important, because we don't want to create a situation where there is any increased hardship on persons. While healthcare, of course, is critical, and to me it should be the #1 priority in terms of persons' finances, we still have to take into consideration those persons who are minimum wage. And to me, what Ms. Clark has just described in terms of the bond option, or even creating or using existing taxes in order to pour that into this health plan, to me might be a little bit more attractive than, say, direct salary deductions.
But of course, you know that existing taxes are already being utilized in some way, shape, or form. For example, the levy. That is, the levy is, I can tell you, as a Minister of Finance in Neves, the levy is part of the income that the government uses for a number of things, the social services levy. And so if you were to take that out of the pool available to the government and say that that now will go for health insurance, it means that you create a hole. So how do you fill that hole? So I think that all of these are considerations. The question for me is that all of us have to come to an aha moment. All of us have to come to a Damascus moment. And that moment is, what is our health worth?
I am of the view that there should be little or no exemptions based on income. Because my experience has taught me that persons who we would like to help, who are making minimum or close to minimum wage, they are the ones you find quite often who are using most of the healthcare dollars. And if they're going to get this care for quote-unquote free, I don't think they're going to value it as much as they should. The percent of deduction from income, the tax on the income, will be a set percentage, 3%, let's say, or 4%. We don't know yet. We want the public to guide us in this regard. However, if you're making $100 per day, you're paying $3 out of that, 3%. The guy who's making $1,000 per day, he's paying $300.
$30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that even if the guy is making minimum wage, let him pay a contribution, because if it comes across as being free, then they tend to abuse it and misuse it and not value what they're getting. So I think everyone should pay whatever the percentage is, so that we can feel a part of it, an owner of this universal health insurance. That is something that we really need to have everyone buy into it. They feel a part of it. Of course, there are situations where there are persons who are indigent. Let's say the mentally ill, for instance, or the elderly who can't work anymore. Those persons will take care of. But if you're working, I think you should make some contribution.
But truth be told, there are a number of persons now, absent national health insurance, who are already being taken care of. Because a lot of those people that you described, basically they get health care for free.
And I don't like too much of this fairness. I agree with Ronald Reagan with a few things. One of them is that nothing is free.
Okay, well, of course, we understand that it has to be paid for. Now let me ask a question, because we're talking, but in my own mind, I'm not quite clear. Is it the intention to get, and Ms. Clark, if you're still on the line, you perhaps are best positioned to answer this. Is it the intention to get a pool of funds? I've heard you talk about a bond. I've heard about potential tax on salary. I've heard about diverting existing taxes and existing amounts, provisions, etc. Is it to get a fund? Let us say, based on the experts, they come back and they said, you know what, to start this up and to run it for the next 5 years, you need $500 million. I'm just pulling a figure out of the air. Is it the intention to get that fund and then somehow manage it, like how Social Security is being managed? Or is it rather a situation where we get sufficient money to buy an insurance policy? What I mean is for us to go to some insurance company or companies and buy a policy and say, listen, we want the 50,000 people in St. Kitts Nevis, or maybe we want this category of that population covered. Because currently, I'm just taking the government as an example, we have bought a policy with national insurance. So we pay a premium, and national insurance then manages the risk associated with that on ordinary insurance principles. So it seems to me that I'm not quite sure which of the two models, if you will, that is being proposed.
It is the first model where to establish or determine financial sources that we pool resources in an effort to manage the fund to be able to provide access to greater amount of persons to quality health care and therefore reducing their financial burden. If I'm not mistaken, I think we got word that I think St. Lucia's Prime Minister was considering the second option. The concerns with going private has to do with, again, when we're able to utilize what we call the economies of scale. Right now, any sick individual that requires overseas care goes and be able to manage, goes and advertise on their own individual basis. So when you take the full population of St. Kitts and Nevis, you're able to do that. Also, we're not a state-run entity, we're not be in the business of making any profit. It's about managing the administrative costs as rules of that management goes, keeping it a certain percentage, so that the majority of it goes into the affairs of purchasing and providing services to the population.
But let me ask you this. I mean, the decision to go in the direction that you have indicated we are going in, was that as a result of the consultations? I'm sorry, not the consultations. Was that a result of the experts from UE or otherwise sort of suggesting that route instead of buying an omnibus insurance policy?
Correct. When persons look, from all of the examples that have been provided to us, you get that sense of solidarity, taking care of economies of scale from a state-managed entity as opposed to simply purchasing block plans. Because one of the considerations for universal health care is that the benefit package is responsive to your burden of disease. Because we have to be able to project, and by managing the costs associated, that level of flexibility is much more possible when you have it run by an entity that's not interested at all in any margins of profit or gain.
Okay, let me ask some of the hard questions since I have you all here, because I know the public out there will ask the same question. Antigua, you had a scheme where you had millions and millions of dollars in the scheme, derived from one of the mechanisms for either taxation or otherwise, and it was subjected to abuse. As a matter of fact, that scheme in Antigua led, I believe, to some people even being imprisoned, because you had essentially a large sum of money and you had people managing it, and so all of a sudden they found creative ways to abuse that system. Do we not run those kinds of risks doing a system where we basically have large sums of money being managed in the way that you are saying? And do we not also run the risk of potentially having the politics interfering in terms of who gets benefit and who doesn't get benefit and the like? The reason I'm asking this question, because clearly we've had the example next door in Antigua, but I recognize that St. Kitts Nevis has about, depending on who you ask, but we have about 50,000 people, let us say. 50,000 people is actually less people than some major companies in the world have as employees.
Correct.
And those major companies provide health insurance for the entire workforce. So hence my suggestion that if we were to look at this as if it were a company, 50,000 people, why is it we would not be able to simply buy a package that covers our people?
Yes. The issues of management, one of the key questions or proposals put forward in the Green Paper asks that question about administration. As has been told to me by professionals in the health sector, management for us is not necessarily a problem. We have, Social Security has celebrated 40 years of managing well the funds trusted to them to be able to give wage replacement assistance to persons who are ill and otherwise. So that's one proposal, to make the funds available and managed by Social Security, which is quasi-governmental, has 40 years of experience in managing.
So there's a track record there.
Correct.
Okay.
The issue of interference, I think some of the frameworks has already been laid in St. Kitts and Nevis. You asked earlier about the indigent population. And through other investments in the social services, we now have a proxy means test, which is an independent way of classifying a household. And that is trusted within the social services unit to be able to allocate resources to the poor and indigent, because that's always a classification that gives most Kittitians a little bit of, Kittitian and divisions a little bit of pause. But who is the poor? Everybody's going to call themselves poor in order to get access to other services. And so it is a matter of closing, using best practices to close some of those gaps. Most of the entities are overseen by a ministered responsibility. And while we understand the Antigua concept, we are trusting, should we say, the level of accountability that Kittitians and divisions place on their cabinet members and politicians as it relates to the investment of their funds. I'm sure your feet has been kept to the fire whenever you are giving your reports as Minister of Finance. We hope to use some of the cultural appropriateness of Kittitians and divisions, the part of us that is there, to be able to compensate for some of those. No system will be absolute. Let me pause this, because if you have professionals and bad intention professionals, you can have mismanagement in any way, shape, or form.
Sure.
But I think as one that can tell you, our legislative frameworks will be able to be improved, service delivery wise throughout the sector, strengthening things such as confidentiality, because even at the lowest level of management, some things in our federation need to be strengthened.
Okay.
But we are trusting that because we're investing and collecting your funds by diverting them from somewhere else, you would keep our persons' trust and put in place the framework should anything go wrong.
All right, good. So you're saying trust. Okay, that's a good word. It's 5 minutes past the hour of 9 o'clock. We're going to take some phone calls. Good evening. You're on the mark.
Good evening, Mr. Brantley.
Good evening to you.
Yes. Firstly, as a matter of, I think, priority, if this thing is going to work, I think we must develop a philosophy around it. And I was just wondering, as a matter of philosophy, is it the intention to deliver cradle-to-the-grave health coverage, or will it be more restrictive?
What is it? What is it? Would you like? What is it you would like to see? Because the green paper, as I understand it, is to start the discussion with the public.
I would like cradle to the grave, but I realize that have implications. I was just wondering too if it's going to be a phased approach or an all or nothing. I mean, well, not nothing, because I mean, even though we were all excited about it and think in terms of superlatives, the fact is we already have some elements of universal health care in our existing healthcare delivery. You know, we just need to expand access, improve the delivery of services, and deal with the financing. But we're really not starting from scratch. And as you indicated, Mr. Brantley, a lot of us are driven by the U.S. media and their approach to healthcare. And so not surprisingly, I too would like to know, first of all, how much choice we would have built in if, for instance, we already have health insurance. Would they be excluded, people who are, have it already, like civil servants? Would they be excluded, or would they have a choice to go on which plan suits them? Or can people choose no plan at all and opt out and take their chances, right? And secondly, most times people try to sell these programs by saying they will cover pre-existing conditions, the pre-existing conditions that you mentioned, and catastrophic conditions, because that is what gobbles up the money. Well, I would like to know who would decide on the caps, and apart from the deductions from maybe your work and that sort of thing, and your employer's inclusions, what the deductibles are sometimes what kill people with insurance. Okay, so I mean,
nice caller, you're making our life difficult, you know, because you're asking more questions, and making the thing even more complex for us. What we're asking you, what would you like to see? For example, I don't know. Have you read the green paper?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
But what I'm...
Well, just wait a minute. For example, you talk about limits. And the green paper is giving an example. In the recommendation, they're saying, for example, you could have $1 million per person. So if you use that up in the first week, or you don't use that at all, it's 1 million per person. The other option could be that it says renewable per individual after a set number of years. Example, 750,000 renewable every 3 years. That is the current thing we have for the government health insurance. So that, for example, in the green paper is set out as a possibility, a scenario. That you get $1 million. So
it's
if
a suggestion.
Yes,
right?
Of course. Everything in the green paper is only a suggestion.
Because we still, I mean, I don't know the economics of it, but I don't know if, for instance, $1 million cap is feasible if everybody is on it. I don't know. They may, I mean, the experts probably know. But the thing is, right, I mean, it's nice, it's nice, bearing in mind, as I said, the discussions that they had in the States. It would be nice if these things are in the green paper itself, because, as you pointed out, even me bringing up these things can make it work difficult, confuse the issues, but they need to be trashed out.
Well, let me ask you something, since I have you on the line. Would you be prepared to pay a tax on salary to support this initiative, to fund this initiative?
I would be.
Okay.
But then there may be other people, remember, who are, you know, under the poverty line, so to speak, I mean, they deserve universal access too. I mean, that's why I said, what is the philosophy? Regardless of where your station in life, you should have access to health care.
Well, I think
the golden plan, where if you have a lot of money, you can get virtually the best of everything, right? As opposed to somebody who is, like I said, below the poverty line.
Well, caller, I think we move beyond that, because the idea obviously is to provide health care to as many people as possible. That is why we're calling the word universal. But what I want to think, we've had, for example, Dr. Rollins, who's here, has suggested that he feels that all people who are gainfully employed, who are working, should make a contribution, so that there should be no threshold. Meaning that whether you make $100 a week or you make $10,000 a week, you should be asked to pay the 3% or whatever the figure.
So that's mandatory, essentially.
But that is a suggestion. So my question to you is, yes, because he as well, he's a healthcare practitioner, and he has suggested that a lot of the healthcare dollars are consumed by individuals who might be in that lower bracket strata. That they're the ones who, in his opinion, or his experience, consume most of the healthcare dollars. So the question is, would you as a member of the public say that everybody pays 3%? Obviously 3% of $100 is $3, I think, if our math is correct, and 3% of $1,000 is $30, if our math is correct. And so the question is really and truly whether or not everybody should be asked to contribute. Who's working? Obviously, if people are not working, they're unemployed or whatever, they too must be covered. Well, and that is always in any tax system. In any tax system, that's the reality, that those who are working, those who are healthy, they contribute for those who are not. That is the whole idea. That is why we get actuarial studies and the like. Even Social Security functions on that same basic principle. And that is why in countries where the populations are aging, it creates a problem.
Maybe instead of saying those who are working, say those who have income, right? Because as you well know, there is also a group of people in our society who are not working, let's say retirees, for instance, who may have sources of income. And the point becomes, and by the way, they're the ones who use up quite a bit of the resources as well.
But that's an interesting point, that it's not the salary, but income.
Yeah, income.
Because some people get investment income as well.
Because, I mean, there are some people who just barely eking out a living, even though they're working. And it may not seem like a lot, but taking 3% out of his salary might have consequences. Okay, but in principle, everybody should at least make some kind of contribution, even if it is just in a deductible, right, to make sure that the system is not abused. Okay, so even if you don't pay into the system, right, have a deductible so that you don't just go to the doctor just on a women fancy and that sort of thing.
Okay, let me ask you this as my final question. You support the idea of health insurance?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I'm grateful to hear you say that, because that means you'll support Eugene Hamilton in the next election. So
no, don't make it political.
That's a light moment. All right, that's a light moment. I'm just trying to get you to chuckle. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is On the Mark. I'm your host, Mark Brantley, and we have with us Mrs. Zilla Clark. I hope she's still on the phone. We have also in the studio with us Mrs. Slack Liber, Dr. Cordell Rollins, and our lawyer, Rhonda Nisbet Brown. I have that correct, right? Nisbet Brown.
Yes, you do. Long with an E, to be exact.
There's double-barrel names that ladies have. You know, ladies get double-barrel names a number of ways, sometimes through marriage and otherwise, because they're, sophisticated women now don't take their husband's name anymore. I mean, when I got married, I offered to take my wife's name, but she was not having it. So it is now 9:15 o'clock. We're going to take some more calls. I believe the phones are ringing. No, I thought I heard the phones ringing. The numbers to call are 869-469-1616. Here we go. Let's go to the phones. Good evening. You're on the mark.
Good night, Mr. Premier. How your night is going?
My night is going well.
Give thanks for life. Good night to you listeners of One Radio on the Mark. Now, coming to you now, pertaining on the 9th convention that we see was part of the human rights law before representation of the government.
Okay, caller, we have a specific discussion on a panel here tonight. We're dealing with health insurance, the national health insurance. So does this have something to do with that? Because we're kind of focused on universal health insurance.
Just as an apart from the Rastafari point of view, what the best aspect when it comes to we as Rastas to being a part of this coverage?
Well, I think Rastas, just like anybody else, are members of the community. They are members of the society here, and therefore they would be entitled to be covered just like every other citizen or resident who the scheme will cover. So I don't think that there will be any discrimination against any group of individuals.
The reason we ask that because remember we don't use the alternative medicine that you all engage with from the synthetic drugs them. So we're looking at where we can use the holistic of them as a part of our remedy treatment too.
Yeah, well, I think a previous caller made that point that what should happen is that holistic medicines, herbs as you say, that they should be covered under the scheme. So I think we've taken note of that, and I'm sure the individuals here are listening. And for those who choose that form of treatment, then the question is whether or not that too would be covered.
Well, I will be have greater dialogue to make sure these emphasis be in place for people.
Yes, and I'm hoping, and I'm hoping that you and others go out to the town hall meetings. There have been 9 of them in St. Kitts, and we're having 5 here in Nevis. So there'll be forums.
That's why I called tonight, because not too long just come from the one who take part in St. Paul's community, where the school area was the use of that dialogue.
Okay, good, brilliant. All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, all right. Okay. We're getting some feedback certainly from the members of the public. We thank that caller. He asked about Rastafarians, but my understanding is that everybody will be eligible to be covered. And that brings me to another question. Going back to the previous caller who asked about cradle to grave, is it that the intention is to cover everybody in the country?
The intention is to cover everybody from the cradle to the grave.
Okay.
While those who can will pay to take care of those who can't.
Well, that is in every society, that's the case. But let me ask you, insofar as you say to cover, or we have a call. Let's take the call. Good evening. You're on the mark.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Brantley and your host.
Good evening to you.
Yes. Just as the Rastaman carried a while ago. Now let's suppose God forbid that it happens. Well, let's suppose that anyone in the Rastafari community gets sick and they got to be in the hospital. Are they going to refuse medical attention before to die rather than take medical, medicine because of their supporting the Rastafari? I mean, come on. But you got to put life first. I mean,
caller, we can't answer that question. You'll have to ask the Rastafarians that question.
Well, what I'm saying is that, but I think probably you should ask them that, because you see, this is the problem we have with these guys. They got to understand we are all human beings, and in spite of what, if a doctor already take medication, you got to work with it until something better can be done, because, I mean...
Yeah, caller, let us understand that people have their human rights and basic dignity.
I understand that.
And people decide. Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, will not take a blood transfusion. Many have died because their view is they will not take a blood transfusion because that is their religious belief. Now, you can view it as being silly. You can view it in many ways, but that is their belief. And they have a right, because each of us has a right, to determine that. So I don't know that that's a debate that we can really have tonight.
Okay.
But my sense is that if they're there and they are fully competent and they say that they do not want to accept the form of treatment that is being proposed.
Okay, let's move on.
Yes.
So, what I want to point out, so let's suppose that you as the breadwinner of the house, right, working, and your wife or your girlfriend is not working because of medical reasons. That person is available to get medical care as well?
Yes, of course.
So,
the intention, as I understand it, is to cover people, as we've heard, from cradle to grave, and to cover the population of St. Kitts and Nevis.
So they also have to get a medical card as well?
Yes, well, that I think is the intention.
Because what I'm trying to find out is, let's suppose I have a medical card and my wife is not working, so can I use my card to support her as well, or she have to get her own?
You who are working and paying into the system, your dependents will be covered. So whether you have children, a dependent wife who doesn't work, you may even have a parent who is retired and living with you that you're caring for, they would also be covered.
Covered along with my
yeah, you would be covered as well. Even though we say we are covering from cradle to grave, we need to make it clear that we are not covering everything.
Okay.
There are some things which are excluded, as in the green paper. For instance, if let's say as a gentleman you come in, you're 60 years old and you want to look 45 and you want to have a facelift, no, we don't cover that.
Okay.
That's the proposal, that we don't cover that, and we think most of the public would agree with us. Okay. So cosmetic surgery would not be covered.
What about things like dental and?
Yeah, we plan to cover dental and vision.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
All right, thank you very much.
But these are the proposals, eh? If the public wants to change them, they can advise us in that regard.
Dental couldn't become cosmetic as well.
Some aspects of dental, yeah, but the basic dental would be covered. Yeah.
Just to follow up on 2 points in terms of unemployed. We recognize we working with a definition of unemployed. So, for example, if you're not working and choose not to work, then that's a different category, and you're not considered unemployed. You must be actively seeking work. So we would be working in collaboration with the Labor Department to determine this. Also, on some of the exclusions mentioned, for example, dental, that would be covered in terms of general dentistry, your cleanings, your fillings, etc. But in the case, for example, you might be in a car accident and need to have some sort of reconstructive procedure, whether it's cosmetic or dental, and so there are exceptions. And in that case, if it's medically necessary, then that would be covered. So we really want you to go through the exclusions because, for example, we would have had discussion with a diabetic group looking at prosthetics. So, for example, if you had an amputation and you lost a leg, and at this point, the green paper proposes that those be excluded. But as a diabetic, or maybe someone that might have been in a car accident,
I disagree. I disagree with that one, though.
You disagree with
the exclusion of prosthesis. If Mary Brown in, let's say, Hickman's is diabetic, she's 40 years old, she loses a leg because of diabetes, I think that her prosthetic should be covered.
Well, I think, as you said, this is why it's a consultation. Yes. There's a room for different views. I have a question of a medical nature, but I think the phones are ringing. But my question of a medical nature is, how come we normally see legs being amputated for diabetics but not arms? Let's go back to the phones and take a call, and then we'll get the doctor a chance to tell us when you get back. Good evening, you're on the mark.
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Pre-existing conditions, right? For example, amputees. An amputee having a prosthesis, a prosthetic leg, it's supposed to be replaced within 2 years. Will this insurance cover the replacement of a prosthesis?
Well, what is your preference? We're asking for your views.
Of course, I will agree with that.
Okay, so you think prosthetics should be covered?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. We're taking your views. Remember, what we're doing here is having a discussion, and notes are being taken. The green paper is a discussion paper, and I hope you're going out to the town hall meetings to share your views.
I didn't even know they had town hall meetings until tonight.
You're in Nevis or St. Kitts?
I'm in Nevis.
Okay, well, the next one is tomorrow night at the Anglican Church in town, and then next Monday at the Franklin Brown Community Center. The next Tuesday at the Hanleys Road Community Center, and Tuesday the 4th of December, Jessup's Community Center. All of them start at 7. So if you and the family can go out and really share your views, because your views are very important to inform the process.
Thank you very much.
Okay, you're very welcome, and thank you for your call. 25 minutes past the hour of 9 o'clock. Dr. Rollins.
The answer would take more time than we have tonight.
But that's a good couple. Okay, we're listening. Miss Clark, you still with us? Okay, it looks like we've lost Miss Clark. Miss Clark? Okay, let's, the phones are ringing still. Let's go back to the phones. Good evening, you're on the mark.
Yeah, just one other quick question.
Sure.
Like I said, I haven't read the green paper, but is there some possibility of, well, have you looked at the possibility of having to send people overseas for medical attention? How would that be handled? Because that again is gobbles up a lot of money. That have a lot of implications.
Yes. The green paper is suggesting that we should cover overseas care. It must be referred. You must be referred by your local physician. The care must be something which is not available here. And the Universal Health Insurance will have referral partners overseas. And if you stay within that network, then the insurance would pay for it. Let's say on the agreed percentage, maybe 80% or whatever it is.
Okay.
If you choose to go out of network, then you're on your own.
Oh, so overseas does not necessarily mean to the States or Canada.
No, it does not mean that.
It's in the Caribbean.
It may be in Puerto Rico, it may be in Barbados, it may be in Trinidad, it may be in Guadeloupe, it may be in Martinique, it may be in the BVI.
All right.
I think I've read somewhere too in the green paper that a medical review board of sorts will be established,
yes,
just to ascertain the authenticity of the treatment, that it's necessary overseas, that maybe, for example, a particular procedure cannot be done locally. So I find that's an important step or part of the procedure to ensuring that those cases that go overseas, that they're genuine ones, where those procedures may not be able to be done.
Well, what happens to people? I, for example, have no family in Puerto Rico, no family in Jamaica or Trinidad, as the case may be, but lots of family and a support system in New York. So I said, listen, I want to go to New York because I'm elderly, and my daughter is there, my family is there, and I know I'll have a support system, which I will not have if you send me to Jamaica or Trinidad for the process. How does that work?
Okay, I'll discuss it in two ways. We're going to be establishing preferred provider networks, for example, and for example, they may not be in New York. And so if you go outside of network, the possibility is that you would not be covered, or you would be covered at a reduced rate. So if, for example, if the insurance would pay 80%, then you would be responsible for 20. But if you go outside, maybe as much as 40% if it's approved, because you have to have pre-authorization to go overseas. One of the other issues that the Green Paper discusses is, I know some persons, if they are referred to an island or a neighboring territory that they do not have family, they looked for an adult to accompany them, a family member, etc. And the Green Paper also discusses that matter as to whether the plan would cover just the patient or the accompanying adult. And if the accompanying adult is paid for to the point, or would it just be transportation, or would it be accommodation and stipend? Because in some countries we've seen that the accompanying adult would be taken care of, not just for flight arrangement, but a little more than that. So those are some considerations that we want to hear from you. We know that we will establish our networks that may or may not be in the U.S. or Canada, as some persons prefer. But we also want to recognize the importance of the private health insurance. We've heard that discussion before. I think a caller had mentioned if civil servants, for example, would they have to have two plans, for example, and that's something that's also up for discussion. So the private insurance companies can come in there as one potential possibility, but as we keep mentioning that there's no concrete decisions in the Green Paper, we want to hear from you. We'll of course establish our own networks, but also want to hear from you as to what you would also be looking for. Just one more comment in regards to overseas care. I think a caller also mentioned that we are providing some sort of universal health care at this time. And if we look at it, we know that if you access the health centers, for example, you do not pay any money at the point of care, but of course, the government does finance these services. And so when you do present to a health facility when this plan comes on board, whether it be a health center or hospital, you will be required to swipe a card, even at the level of the health center. You will not be charged any fee, but of course the service will be recorded, and so we can actually recognize and actually pay back or finance our services that we provide.
Someone just sent me a note asking, what about self-employed people? How would they be treated?
Well, we're covering all categories of persons in the beneficiaries. In the green paper also discusses the list of beneficiaries in terms of employed, self-employed, etc. And so similar to Social Security, where self-employed persons are required to contribute, we would do an assessment and determine how much that would be based on how much a self-employed person is earning. So that would also be factored in. Self-employed persons, as well as a category we call voluntary contributors. So, and that is very applicable in our population. We might have persons living overseas, citizens, for example, who may live in St. Kitts and Nevis 6 months out of the year, 3 months, and you know, we also taking into consideration those persons, and although they might not have an established income locally, whether they can provide some contribution and also be covered.
I see, of course, in our country we now have quite a large number of persons who are coming in from overseas. A non-national community has grown. And I just, you know, looking quickly through the green paper, I see work permit holders. One recommendation is that there be no coverage. So no coverage shall be provided within the first year. If the work permit is extended beyond 1 year, then they can begin contributing in month 9, so as to start receiving benefit at the end of the year. Alternatively, coverage extended to them upon start of contribution, so as to build a pool of contributors. So clearly the green paper. Now, I think an important question for me, is there anywhere online that people can get the green paper? Or is it just the hard copies that are available?
No, it should be on the NIA website. So we also, if at the back of the green paper, you would see some contact information as well in terms of the National Commission, which also has a Facebook page, and by email you can also request a copy at nationalcommissionskn@gmail.com. And the National Health Insurance Secretariat is located at Port Zante. So also to say that, yes, we're in discussions actively in this process, but there's also a physical location that persons can access if they also want to present in person and get additional information. And of course, here in Nevis, at the Ministry of Health, you can also access whether it's hard copies or request soft copies from us. And we also want to state once again that the town hall meetings are not the only way of receiving information about the green paper, because some persons have expressed that it's not in their respective communities, but we do offer you the option of coming to you. In health, we take services to people where they are, including information. And so if you're not able to access the town hall meeting, we're willing to come and present to you, which we have been doing over the past weeks. So it's also in terms of hard copies, I just want to mention that they are located at all health centers, at the hospital, and all primary and secondary schools on the island. So we know that schools are like central in communities, and if you want to access a hard copy, you can do that. And also at libraries. We also would have sent copies out to banks and other workplaces in Charlestown. So you should be able to access documents throughout the island. There's also been a drive, I think on Monday, where we would have driven around and delivered copies to various establishments throughout Nevis. So The paper is out there, but of course I know some persons have voiced that they have not received a copy, and we're willing to provide that to you. It should also be available on the government, the NIA website. So it is out there, and we continue to put it out there more at your request.
I recognize that the financing is going to be a big issue. One of the proposals I see in the Green Paper is the suggestion that currently we pay taxes on what they call sin taxes. So we pay taxes on gambling, lotto receipts, tobacco, alcohol. But the big debate, and I know it's happening even at the CARICOM level, is should we start to tax sugary beverages and trans fats?
Yes.
So we have a situation now where, of course, lots of us drink soda. We drink, lots of these box drinks and box juices and things like that nature. Bag drinks. It's ironic because I've heard the debate that we try to encourage our young people and adolescents to eat properly. We have gone so far in Nevis as to hire a chef to be a part of our school meals program to seek to inform nutrition and all of that. But then right outside the school gate, you have people sitting down selling corn curls, selling chocolates, selling candy, lollipop, selling bag drink, soda. So the kids come out and they just have it right there. So inside you're telling them to eat properly and all of that, right outside the gate. And you see that at every school. And it's been an ongoing debate as to whether or not you ought to deprive many of whom are small business people of that opportunity. But the two things just don't go together. It's as if you're trying to hold fire and water in the same hand. So one of the proposals here is to tax sugary drinks and trans fats, which will really mean that a lot of the things that the people who earn less tend to consume because they're cheap, that those things will become more expensive. So Dr. Rollins is quite clear that we should tax sugary drinks, so sodas and the like, that they're sinful and should have a sin tax attached to them. I would be delighted to know what the views of the public are on such a matter.
While we wait for the public to call in on that one, there's something else that I would like the input on. The governance structure of the universal health insurance. One option here in the Green Paper is to make it a division of Social Security. Social Security having already had all of the infrastructure to collect funds and that sort of stuff. If we can just create a division within Social Security, hiring the required human resource to deal with healthcare. Or should we start a brand new entity from scratch, a health authority, to manage this universal health insurance? We would like to hear from the public which option they think would be best.
Well, that's one of the discussions I know Nicole and I had when we were outside waiting, because we were wondering if the statutory type body arrangement may not be more suitable for this situation. I know that I read in the Green Paper that I think it's Turks and Caicos, who have embraced the statutory body type arrangement, and I'm thinking, if the way I see this plan coming into a reality is that we should think about the statutory structure, because I believe that we may very well see the need for a lot of legislative reforms in order for the universal healthcare plan to work. I read in the Green Paper, for example, where other persons apart from medical practitioners, for example, may have to be registered. You may have pharmaceuticals coming on board who may need a particular type of license, and so forth. And I foresee quite a lot of legislative work taking place with this. So I am thinking, if perhaps that may not be the preferred route. I don't know if Nicole would want
what
to
may not be
there.
the preferred route?
Not having it set up as a attachment of Social Security, but creating a unit. I think Dr. Rollins just spoke about a health authority.
So you're saying the health authority might be the preferred
I am suggesting that that may very well be the preferred route because of the huge task of and the operational framework that.
But then Ms. Clark spoke about the institutional capacity that Social Security has. They're 40 years old, etc. They have, and I think they have the
isn't
confidence.
Social Security already so burdened?
Well, but that's the idea, is to hire additional staff and create a division within Social Security to deal with this.
One of the disadvantages of setting up a health authority is you're starting from scratch. You have to hire a lot of workers. And a lot of the monies that you collect, instead of going into healthcare, would actually be spent in wages.
Or maybe use the Social Security route as an interim type of, measure just to enable it to get off the ground. Since the Social Security, has the built-in capacity already. But I believe we should be looking at it in a more futuristic way, that this is not just an immediate solution of, let's use Social Security because it's easier. I think if we want this, healthcare plan to work sufficiently and properly, I believe that we need to be thinking about the other structure in the long term.
Okay, let's go back to the phones and take some more views. Good evening, you're on the mark.
Yes, my last intervention.
Yes.
With regards to governance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we have the civil service scheme, right?
Mm-hmm.
Without any huge bureaucracy involved. And I would prefer that we go that route as opposed to creating some big new bureaucracy.
Yeah, but caller, remember with the civil service, what we've done is bought an insurance policy.
Yes.
Remember, I don't know if you're listening from the start of the show.
Yes, I understand that.
Right, I did ask the question. So there's no, the management of it right now lies with National Insurance.
Okay, which is fine, which seems to be working just fine. And I'm saying that I think it's probably better that we introduce some element of competition in it to keep costs down, and without having some new government bureaucracy. And that's why I asked about choice in the beginning.
But caller, to me you're confusing me because I'm not quite sure the point that you're making.
I am wary of a new government bureaucracy.
Okay, so we have, I think, in terms of we have the option of the government saying, listen, let me spend $10 million, $15, $20 million, whatever it is, per year, and buy an insurance policy to cover the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. Okay?
That's right.
That is similar to the government now saying, I'm buying an insurance policy with national insurance to cover the government employees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What Ms. Clark, who was on the line earlier, indicated, the chairperson, that they have decided not to go that route, but rather to go the route of having a fund from which health and healthcare, etc., can be funded. I asked all the questions because it looks to me that it will be similar to, say, what Antigua did. Yeah?
Well, like I said, I'm wary of government with huge funds at it.
Well, that is the issue. That's the issue. That is now when we're dealing now with it.
Remember too, if you have several insurance companies competing for this business, it is a lucrative business, right? Most likely they bid for, it would be a competitive bid.
Okay, well, all I'm saying is that it appears that the commission has looked at and they've opted. Well, at this stage, it looks as if they're expressing the proposal to have a fund. And so the question that was asked by Dr. Rollins is, how is that fund? Assuming for the moment that we go the way of a fund. So we have a pool of $100 million for sake of argument. How is that to be managed? One suggestion is that since Social Security has institutional knowledge, in fact, Social Security manages some small aspect of health now because they have health benefits that they pay. So could we have a division within Social Security that manages this fund? Or alternatively, do we set up a brand new, I think I like the language you used, Dr. Wallace, or was it a health
authority?
A health authority, which might be a statutory authority, statutory body like SCASPA or any of those, which then would manage the fund. So there are a number of options on the table.
It's a matter of philosophy, I guess, right? But you know, we know we have experience. We know our experience with government bureaucracies.
But you keep going back to government bureaucracy.
But caller, you said you talk about insurance companies. We have recent memory with insurance companies too.
Exactly.
British American to speak of.
left a lot of us.
Yeah.
That's true. Yes, I guess there are pros and cons to everything. But if you're going to suggest an authority, though, you know, we should be very careful about controls and things like that to make sure that we don't end up with some bloated bureaucracy that folds up in the next 10 years.
Well, I suppose the point that Ms. Clark made, I thought was a good point, Carla, because in fairness, the country does have the benefit of 40 years of Social Security, and Social Security, in my view, has been one of those...
Which governments raise from time to time.
Well, you say that, but it has existed for 40 years, and I have not heard that Social Security has been plagued by any scandals or any mismanagement or anything of that nature. Okay. And so Social Security, within our midst, right here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have a model of an agency that has functioned very well, in my view. Okay. And right now is from what I gather, quite healthy in terms of its financial position.
Okay. All right. I'm just looking at varying options, and hopefully, you know, it's important that we get this right, that we, you know, come up with something good. We've had the experience of so many other people, other islands, other countries. So, you know, it would be nice if we look at all the models and probably come up with the best one.
Well,
I don't know what that is yet.
But that is what we're seeking to do, and that is why I think they're doing the right thing, and they're having a consultation. Yeah?
Okay.
Okay. I'm just looking
I
at...
think
yeah.
Nicole can also speak to the fact that, for example, the BVI used the Social Security model, so...
But they're now moving away from that. The plan has been in existence for about 4 years now, and it would have started as Social Security, but it has grown to such an extent that it needs to be managed independently, because Social Security, from many of the functions, we're sharing the same resources, of course, in terms of human resources. And so that has become a bit burdensome, and to effectively manage, they should be, by 2019, separate and move to a separate health authority to manage. So that is a consideration also on the table. Do we start with Social Security, as we've heard, or start from scratch? Yes, it might be a heavy investment at the beginning, but is that something that we really want to explore?
Okay, so we see here, I'm looking at the green paper again because we run out of time. We have about 12 minutes left. We're looking at the benefit package. And I see here primary care, nutrition, maternal, obstetrics, child health, immunization, family planning, contraceptives, testing, counseling, sterilization, tubal ligations, contraceptives. Some religious folks might protest that. I mean, even in the U.S., I think, isn't that a bit of a debate for Catholics in particular? But anyway, we won't get into that. Preventative care, testing, screening, mammogram, colonoscopy, counseling, immunization, specialist visits, casualty and emergency room care, surgery and intensive care, hospital room and board, diagnostics, x-ray, biopsy, ultrasound, CT scan, MRI, prostate-specific antigen, pharmaceutical services, mental health, dental care, vision care, rehabilitation such as physical therapy, psychological care, and then, of course, you have overseas care. Are we being overly ambitious in terms of the wide range of care that you're proposing that this scheme do? Or are we not better off scaling it? That we start here and we scale up as the fund grows and as we get the expertise and we grow the fund and the capacity?
That was discussed, and the jury is still out because we're still waiting to hear from the public. A scale model is one option, or full throttle from the beginning. We actually want to hear from the public as to what they think we should do, because it's important to find out early. If you're doing a scale model, the contributions initially may be a bit smaller. If you're to go in full throttle from the beginning, the contributions would have to be slightly higher.
But then a higher percentage of persons may be excluded with the scale-back model.
Agreed.
Because
each option have advantages and disadvantages. That is why we want the public's buy-in, because we don't want to come and impose something on the public. We want the public to participate with us, tell us what they would like to see, and we try and come to a consensus.
But I just listed, I clearly did a quick run through, but to my mind, dental care, annual cleanings, fillings, extractions.
Those are basic healthcare.
That we offer.
We're doing it currently, you know.
Rehabilitation services, speech and language therapy.
It's been done now.
Occupation. I understand that, but I'm simply saying that when you go to a process where you are introducing this, are we being overly broad and overly ambitious in terms of the service that we provide? But let's go to the phones and take another call. Good evening. You're on the mark.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah. What I'd like to know is, with the healthcare that you're promoting, would you be looking to replace the personal or private medical insurance, or would you be competing with the current services provided by the insurance companies, or will you be complementing the current service of the insurance companies?
I think that's an excellent question. I don't have the answer, so I turn that to the experts.
At this point, from our assessment, we have determined only 30% of the population in St. Kitts and Nevis is covered by private health insurance. So there's a huge gap, and this is very important, especially as it relates to overseas care. This service would be a mandatory service, as we would have seen that as we propose, everyone would have access. At this point, many persons do not have access, and we're looking to provide access to the population in general, and not just those who can afford private health insurance coverage. So we will be providing services. Of course, some of these services will be duplicate. I mean, I wouldn't say duplicate. Maybe that's not the right term, but private health insurance will also be offering this service, and that's why it's important for us to not just dialogue with the general public, but also key stakeholders, and we have been doing that with private health insurance companies to see how we can work together as we move towards implementation.
But I think the question for me, if I have private health insurance that I'm paying for, so I have a policy that covers me and my family, it's also, for example, most of the big companies, Four Seasons, etc., they would have a policy that covers their employees, but yet you're saying to them, for the universal health insurance, that they must still contribute to that.
Then, yeah, and here's the scenario. It's now mandatory for Four Seasons to contribute to this universal health insurance. So then, as a company, they'll just drop their insurance for the employees. They don't need it anymore.
Yeah, but what about me as the individual? Should I not have the choice?
You as the individual.
Suppose I have a good package.
You can have your. If you have your personal health insurance, you can actually keep it. It can be complementary. Here's the reason. You have a catastrophic illness and you need to be transferred to Trinidad or Miami. The universal health insurance will not pay 100%. The balance which your copay, your private insurance covers that balance. And so your private insurance is actually is complementary to the universal health insurance. There's no need to get rid of your personal health insurance. It's complementary.
But then would I not be paying twice? Because I'm buying private health insurance, which I have now.
Yeah.
And the government is then mandating that I contribute.
But you're benefiting, because if you do not have the private and you just have the government mandatory and you have catastrophic illness, you still have to come up with 20%. Whereas by having your private insurance, you now come up with zero, because the private complements the universal health insurance.
I agree. And in fact, even there's quite a lot of people do that as well, where you have the private insurance and you're still buying to the government insurance as well, because I quite agree with Dr. Rollins. I mean, if you're gravely ill, unfortunately, then you do have the two which would complement each other and will increase, and help your chances of, health success in a sense. And I know quite a few persons who already have the two insurance, so you don't have to have one and not the other. I would certainly encourage, persons to try and, have the two.
And for those persons who would say, well, if I have this, I don't need that. There was one case within the last 18 months where one person who went to North America for health care, and the bill came up to $156,000 US. 20% of $156,000 US is a lot of money. So it really helps to have that complementary private insurance which covers the other 20%.
Okay, let's go back to the phones. Good evening, you're on the mark. Good evening. Could you speak up? We can't hear you that well.
Okay. What time frame you guys are looking at for this to come into effect?
Well, at this point right now, we're doing the consultations on the green paper, and it's our hope to move to the white paper by the end of 2018, after which we will submit it to Cabinet, and if they are satisfied, then we will be able to implement. So at this point, we can't give a definite timeline, but we will continue to update. But we do know in the immediate term that we hope to submit by the beginning of the year to Cabinet, and then after that decision is made, then we'll move towards implementation. So we can update you as the time progresses.
Thank you. Excellent idea, and I hope the whole of St. Kitts Davis get on board. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. As a member of the Cabinet, I can tell you again, I feel like I'm a Eugene Hamilton cheerleader, but he has really been pushing this, and I believe that he has indicated that he would want to implement by the first quarter of next year. So he's on a very ambitious timeline. I'm not sure if that's going to be possible, but certainly I prefer that we be more ambitious than less ambitious in relation to this. It is really a significant development for the country. It is really something that I agree with you, caller, that I hope everybody gets behind, because as I say, nobody has a monopoly on good ideas, and whoever came up with it ought to be credited, of course, but it is something that will benefit us for generations to come. And I am always touched, because as Minister of Health for some years here in Nevis, you see the pain. People come to you and you recognize. Some people, things happen in the dead of night. I have been at the hospital on one occasion when we were trying to get an air ambulance to come in here. Had to call the airport, get them open the airport for an air ambulance to come. I'm sure Mrs. Slack-Liebert here and Dr. Rollins will have their own stories of having to assist sometimes getting a boat to go over to St. Kitts at the, health care and health sickness is something that is really, when it comes, it can be very catastrophic for people. And to come up with a scheme, a system, a methodology that will bring relief to people, I think that ought to be commended. And this is something where I feel that regardless of the politics sometimes, all of us can get behind, because it will benefit all of us. The ban has struck up. You know what that means. We have to go. I want to thank Mrs. Slack-Liebert, our Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Health, Dr. Cardell Rollins, and, of course, Rhonda Nisbet Brown, our legal counsel. They have been a phenomenal guests here this evening. They've shared a lot of information. We've had, I think, a good discussion on the Green Paper. And just to remind the general public that tomorrow at the St. Paul's Anglican Church Hall, we have the second town hall meeting at 7 p.m. And then on Monday at the Franklin Brown Community Center, Tuesday, the Handley's Road Community Center, and the following Tuesday, the 4th of December, at the Jessup's Community Center. Your views are important. Please come out and share your views, bring your family, and have a conversation about universal health care coverage. That's our show for this evening. Good night. This show is rebroadcast tomorrow at 1 p.m. I trust If you didn't hear it tonight, you'll hear it tomorrow. And some say it's so nice that they listen twice. That's our show. Good evening. God bless.